Hello, good afternoon. It's Mrs. Clark coming at you from my kitchen. Henry is still sick, but I should be definitely back tomorrow. Hopefully his fever will be gone today. Anyway, so obviously as you are listening to this, hopefully you are on your headphones. You do need your language video guide if you, this is the video guide that we started on Tuesday, we added to it on Wednesday, and we're going to finish this video guide today. If you don't have the video guide, there are some in my room, or you could just answer questions, or you could get the questions from It's Learning and answer on a separate sheet of paper. Or you could always skip that little section and go back and do it later. If you were gone yesterday and you didn't watch the clips that are on It's Learning, then you'll definitely want to watch those clips before you watch today's clip, or it might not make as much sense. We're going to take a little bit of notes today and kind of continue our process of language, and we will review all of this tomorrow. Intelligence reading number 1 is due tomorrow. We did a reading check yesterday. You need to make that up with me Friday or Monday, if we can find some time. It should take you less than 10 minutes. Intelligence reading number 2 is due on Monday, and then yesterday we also got an article that you're annotating for Wednesday for graded discussion. Okay, so today we're looking at how language develops as part of our process of finalizing language. So, slight review. I was going to add some pictures, but I guess not. Skinner and Chomsky, this is what we talked about Tuesday. So Skinner talked about that language develops because in your environment, people have reinforced you for speaking, you copy them or learn through observation, and then whenever you did speak, you were rewarded for that speaking, and so you keep speaking. That is true, but that doesn't really explain the whole picture, and that's where Chomsky comes in. Chomsky added the idea that you are innately destined or wired to be a speaking creature, and that your language development abilities are universal. You could develop like any language in that, especially in that first year. That it's biological and for babies, children, and so it comes very easily to them. They don't have to work at it because your brain is just ready to start speaking or to acquire language. And then that universal grammar, that all languages have certain things in common, etc. So both are correct. And I think that I left off with this on Tuesday, that when you look at the fact that new language learning gets a lot harder with age, Chomsky said that's because you have this, he called it a language acquisition device, the LAD, in your brain that's really open through age like 7 to 9. And we do know, and you saw in the video clips yesterday, that they talked about that when you're in that range of baby to 9 years old, that you use a different part of your brain to learn language than adults do. So that device actually turns off, and then after age 9, you can still learn a second language or a third language, but it's not that with that ease that you would as a child, because you're now using a different part of your brain, and it's effortful encoding, etc. Okay, so biologically, language is made possible by our body. We've seen a lot of this in the video clips that we've been watching. So you get the genetics that wire the development of specific, areas of your brain, the fact that you've developed a larynx, and then all of the neurons that you have and the neural connections between all of these areas of the brain, between your brain and your mouth, tongue, larynx, all of that stuff makes it biologically possible for you to speak. And then we also talked about, or you saw in the video, that a lot of animals have the same biological setup, yet they can't speak. So then that tells us that there's some key differences in the brain, abilities in the brain that that we have that animals don't have. So breaking it down, or in summary, genes design the mechanisms for understanding language and producing language. Genes design your larynx, your tongue, your brain, and then you need, though, the experience. That's what Chomsky's talking about. Depending on the experience, where are you raised, that's going to be the language that you learn. And that's what Skinner's talking about too, the experiences of, what language is used in your house, how are you reinforced for using that language, etc. So you need this environmental aspect that interacts with the biology that you have, and then that shows how the language is then developed. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to have you press pause on my presentation and watch the next and final clip for your video sheet. You're going to pick up at, this is on my Google Drive, so when you click on this link, this will take you right to the video. 1 minute and 45 seconds picks up with Steve, who has damage to his brain, and they were looking at how he can't say action words. That's where we left off. And then this will take you to about 8:30. 8 minutes and 30 seconds is the end of them talking about babies being and how babies are wired for language, and then gets into a totally different story about an autistic gentleman. But we're not going to watch that story. So 1:45 to 8:30, press pause and go ahead and watch this video, fill out your video sheet, and then come back to this presentation. Welcome back. Okay, so what we're going to talk about next is how language develops in children. So language development amongst children, no matter where you're born or what language you're going to be speaking, is universal. It follows the same series of steps. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the difference between receptive language and productive language. So babies and children, they aren't saying their first words until they're about 1 year old or just before 1 year old. So, they used to think, okay, that's when babies are starting to understand language and be able to, once they're able to produce it. But what we now know is that actually children are learning language and understand what's being said before they can actually speak it, which is why a lot of parenting books and kind of in modern parenting, they encourage teaching babies at least some simple signs or sign language because they can understand or have ideas that they want to convey, and they can sign those things before they can talk. Biologically, they can't talk until they have that shift in their larynx, right? There's a lot of neurons that have to connect together to allow for the speaking to happen, but their brain is actually understanding the people around them much before this. They think as young as 3 and 4 months old, they're starting to understand language. So this idea is called receptive language. At 3-4 months, babies or humans start to become aware of the speaker. When someone is speaking, they look to that person and they're looking, and it looks like they're listening. They are listening. They know their own name and recognize their own name and will turn to their own name. They know when they're being talked to and when they're being talked about. They also begin gesturing or vocalizing in response to the speaker. So, you kind of say, oh, who's a cute baby? And then they flap their hands back to you, and squeak and squawk and kick, right? So they're trying to kind of enter into or start it's kind of like a conversation. The conversations are a back and forth. They can't form words, but they are responding to the speaker. They also find that babies can start to follow simple commands. They're reaching for something and you tell them no, and they stop what they're doing. Of course, they're babies. This isn't always foolproof or 100% followed, but that does show that they are starting to understand what words mean. So well before they can enter into productive language, they're actually understanding, and this is called receptive language. All right, so they're also in that kind of 3 to 4 months, starting what they call a babbling stage. So these are generic sounds at first. I put up here universal adaptation because, babbling, it doesn't know any uh, language, or it's not like babbling isn't different in any baby or country around the world. And in fact, when they've done research studies, they cannot tell the difference, or people can't tell the difference between a babbling baby from the Middle East, Africa, Asia, the United States. It all sounds the same. So there's no nothing distinct about language in the babbling stage. So from about 1 to 2, you enter into the one-word stage. So I think my son's first word was num num for food, or more, probably also related to food. And then mama, dada, those types of things. And my daughter's first word was mama, right? And then they start just entering into the labeling, like cup, banana. I'm just like looking around my kitchen here. Coffee. So they just kind of say those one single words, labeling types of words, and they enter into that from about age 1 to age 2. Then they start developing a little bit more by about age 2. So 2-word statements is they can start to put 2 things together. So like maybe green cup or Peppa Pig cup. Those types of things, putting 2 things together, 2-word stage. Then the next level is telegraphic speech. This is where they're more telling what's happening. So like a telegram, go car, mama go, or mama go work. So they're actually, they're missing a lot of those that, at, right, those little words, but they have, they're putting their nouns and verbs together, and they're explaining things that are happening. And so this is 2-ish, depending, and it really depends on the child. After age 2, then we start getting rapidly developing into complete sentences. So they're putting things together. I don't know what my daughter said the other day when we were like counting how many words she had said, but I go to my room, get my dolly, and play with her. And we were just like, oh my gosh, she's just put a ton of stuff together all at once. So when they all of a sudden kind of just start stringing these words, and those 2 words turn into 3, 4, 5 words, and until they're speaking adult-like. So this is kind of outlining that summary of language development here. All right, so language is spoken, written, gestured words, and the way we combine them together to communicate meaning. And we do this in thousands and millions of ways. I think the English language I just saw in a video has something like 615,000 words. Okay, so how do we combine those words? Right, in very unique ways. Think of all the songs that have been written about the same type of thing, or all the books that have been written with similar types of things, but the words that have been put together, the combinations, the ideas are, limitless. Okay, so language breaks down into a couple of key things that we're going to talk about, and you're going to watch a couple little example videos of. So the first breakdown is phonemes. So phone, think about what a phone does. And originally, a phone was intended to make a phone call, to hear someone's voice. Okay, so a phoneme is the smallest distinctive sound unit in any word. So English has about 44 phonemes. So every single letter has a phoneme. So since my child is in preschool and he's learning his letters, right, and he'll eventually be a reader, but the first thing that you do when you're teaching someone to be a reader is teaching them phonemes. So S, S, G, G, A, B, B, right? So we have in English 44 phonemes. All of the letters in the alphabet, so 26 letters, have different sounds. Plus, we have some combos, some special combo sounds, like C and H is ch, or O and O is oo, D and G, j. Okay, so we have combos. We have like, E can be or E. So there are about 44 different phonemes in English. So this is one of the things that makes learning another language so challenging. When you do the speaking in your foreign language classes and you have to do the speaking section or the listening section, hearing a native speaker speak the language is different from listening to an English speaker speak that same language, right? They have an accent, maybe you've called it. So the accent is a phoneme. I mean, you think about the letter R in English is R. In Spanish, it's R. In French, it's type of sound. So just the letter R, the same written letter R, can have a different sound depending on which language it is. And I think a lot of the Asian languages don't even have that sound in their language. So phonemes make learning languages a real challenge, or speaking languages a real challenge. And that's why, most people who are coming to the United States or learning English speak English with an accent, because they have to learn or try to do different phonemes. So I want you to get a look at these phonemes and give a try some of these phonemes by clicking on this YouTube link here right below, or in the presentation that I have. Click on the link and listen to some of these phonemes from around the world. They're interesting. So take some time, please, and do that. Okay, so hopefully you press pause and listen to some phonemes for a little while. The next thing that we'll talk about are morphemes. So morphemes are different. Phonemes are sound. Morphemes are the smallest unit in a word that carries meaning. Okay, so if there is, for example, like a pre-test, a post-test, you guys know that a pre means before, post means after. If something has like a bicycle, a tricycle, a unicycle, 2 wheels, 3 wheels, 1 wheel. If something ends with an ed, it's past. If it's an ing, it's happening right now versus happened in the past. So each one of these prefixes, suffixes, gives you information about the word and what is, what the word is trying to convey. Tell me what happened, tell me what's happening. That gives you, or tells you what the person wants to hear and how you should respond. So these are parts of the word that carry meaning. Grammar is the rules of how we combine words together that help us understand one another. Okay, so I was just saying that if someone said, oh, I want to know what happened, versus I want to know what's happening, right? They're telling you what they want to know, and depending on the word choice that they use, that tells you how you should respond. So grammar, are the rules of any language, helps us understand one another. And grammar breaks down into semantics and syntax. So semantics, you've actually seen the word semantics several times, like semantic encoding, semantic memory. And remember I said semantic is some meaningful, right? So semantics in grammar are, if you see right in the definition, deriving meaning, okay? And what the words that people use, right? And how we get meaning from that. How do we interpret? Okay, so if you look at like the cartoon at the top, if I have 12 tomatoes and take away 2, what's the difference? Exactly, I don't like tomatoes either. Why are you in here? Semantics, he's saying. So that the teacher saying you're answering in a sassy way when maybe the child didn't know or took the meaning differently. That would be semantics. If I said to you all, oh, I was talking to the girls down in the office, who are you imagining I'm talking to? If I used the word the girls, am I talking to, how old are the people, right? If you're using the words the girls. So maybe I was talking to the secretaries in the main office. They're all, my age or older. So, but that maybe you were thinking I was talking to young children because I used the word girls. So the word choices that we give, depending on how we interpret those words or when we think it's best to use those words, may lead to some potential confusion. Sometimes it can lead to confusion. Okay, so here's another one. Billy, I'm not going to argue semantics of whether or not you penetrated skin, or of biting, whether or not you penetrated skin, I'm calling your mother's. He's like, it's not really a bite because I didn't penetrate skin. That doesn't count as biting. Okay, so I think another common one I hear is, oh, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, they yelled at me. Right? Or maybe you said it about your parents, like, don't yell at me, or you yelled at me. And they say, I wasn't yelling. Right? Yelling is a word that you use for like getting talking to or being disciplined. But it doesn't necessarily mean raising your voice. Whereas somebody else might say, I wasn't yelling because I didn't raise my voice. That's semantics. Syntax is the rules for how we combine sentences. So if you want to, say, oh, that's a cute dog. Whereas if you said that same sentence or wanted to convey that same sentence in, like I know French works this way, you'd say like the dog cute. Okay, so where do you put the noun? Where do you put the verb? Where do you put the adjective in the sentence to make sense? The fact that you have to, like in French, again, choose, is it a masculine word or a feminine word? And then that depends what type of the you use. Is it la? Is it la? So when you're all of those different specific rules of how to combine them into a sentence that makes sense is syntax. So this is why like Google Translate can maybe get you into trouble, because if you're using one of those online translator things and they make the syntax wrong, anyone who's a native speaker will read what's there and say that this sentence doesn't make any sense. Okay, so grammar matters. I love these types of things. One of my pet peeves is the your thing. Your, you are, your versus you apostrophe R E, your. So you're dead. This is a pretty good one too. If you don't have the correct grammar, you maybe don't make sense, or someone might not think that you know your English very well. Or that maybe you didn't take time on something, or you sound sloppy or uneducated. All right, so thinking about how you use language, what if you lost language, the power that language and words have to convey meaning, to evoke emotion, etc. The last thing we'll talk about is how would you think, or would you think differently if you didn't have language? So the interplay of thought and language, this is the last thing we'll talk about. Linguistic determinism is Benjamin Whorf bringing up that language affects the way that we think. So this is linked to, there's lots of examples. I think there's a lot of examples in your book. And on the next slide, I do have a video that you can watch if you want to see some examples, because I think this concept is kind of tough for people to wrap their mind around. But basically what this is saying is that any specific culture, if they don't have certain words in their language, or the words that they do have in their language, it affects the way that they think. For example, I remember reading that some culture had no word for money. Like that word, the word money didn't exist. So if the word money doesn't exist, that's because it's not important or not needed in that culture. And so if you don't even need a word for money, it doesn't even come up, then you're never thinking about money. And if you're never thinking about money, then how would that make you different than people like here in the US, for example, right, or in lots of other places? There's another one in the video that I'll have on the next slide. They talk about in a culture where they don't have counting or numbers. It's just not important. Think about the video we saw, the Eskimo counting, 1 to many, right? So then could you do math? Could you add? Could you subtract? Would you develop that capability? Doesn't that affect your thinking if you don't have those words, or because you don't need those words? So that's what Benjamin Whorf brings up, is linguistic determinism, the idea that you have languages or words for the certain things that you think about or you want to convey. And so you don't think about anything that you don't say, or that you don't know, or that you don't think you need to know. So this is kind of that back and forth there. Okay, so then can you think without words, right? Think about implicit memories, like just motor memory, mental imagery. A lot of people do that, like mental imagery, like to succeed, like imagining themselves succeeding on something, or to go through some type of simulation by just like, okay, I'm going to do really well on my pilot's test and I'm going to imagine myself going through all the motions. That's all visual. I think Einstein talked about thinking in images and then trying to put those images to words. Lots of artists, composers, athletes, poets think in images or get a mental picture of what something should look like, and then they turn those images into words. So I don't know what it is for you, something definitely maybe to think about. Okay, so a couple things I'll just show you here on this PowerPoint that you can use as you wish. First is examples of linguistic determinism. This is a young girl giving lots of examples of how languages are different, and how language can affect your thoughts. There's lots of really good examples in there. And then another optional thing for one more review, Crash Course Psychology's little episode on language goes through everything that I've talked about regarding language. And if you want to or want to come back to it at some point, that's another thing you could do. All right, thanks so much for your attention and have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Stay cool. Bye.